Hi everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic day. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jackie, and together with my husband John, we have started this YouTube channel to document from the very beginning our entire process of creating a homestead. We also have a small business called the Wandering Ooak with 2 O's, just like the YouTube name. I sell my handmade products there. It would be a fantastic way for you to support us and get to know us. You hit the YouTube subscribe button and the notification bell. You will get notified every time I post a video. I post videos Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I hope to see you guys. Join the family. Currently, we live on just under a quarter of an acre in Northeast Ohio, right along Lake Erie in Zone 6A. So right now, all we can really do is garden on a small scale, as well as in the spring, we are trying to get everything ready and in order for us to be able to get chickens. But our goal is in a few years to be able to move on to our forever property and eventually build a home on there. So today, I have my notes right here. I made a list of 10 things that I learned my first year of growing food. So this was my first year growing potatoes, and one thing that I took away from this season is don't plant them where you can't stake them up. I had no idea going into this that potatoes needed to be staked, and I still don't know if people actually do that, but I find it to be necessary with as much rain as we get here. They flop over and they just make a mess. So next year I'm just going to plant them in like 1 or 2 rows at a time and stake those up so they don't flop over. Another thing I learned is that it is paramount to give garlic enough nutrients. I completely forgot about the garlic that I planted last year because you plant garlic in the fall, so now is the time you want to be planting garlic. And by the time that next spring rolls around, like how it did this year, it just completely, I forgot about it. And I didn't give it any additional nutrients. I didn't, fertilize it at all. And I harvested it way past the time that it wanted to be harvested. By the time I got to it, the entire plant, all the way down to the bulb, was completely dried up. And when I pulled them out, they were incredibly small heads. 1, don't forget about your crops. And 2, give garlic enough food, because anything in the allium family is going to be a heavy feeder, like garlic and onions and chives and all that. And that's gonna segue me into my next point, that fertilizer is more important than you may think. It is really important to fertilize things even, maybe a few times throughout the season. And I am not one that naturally just gives things fertilizer. That's not even on my radar. But when you're growing things that are producing, heavily producing food for you, it's important to give them enough nutrients so they have the energy to then go and produce the food for you. The next thing that I want you to think about is that your garden is not one season. It's actually kind of more like 3 seasons. You have the cool temperatures of the spring as it's warming up. You want to be planting your brassicas and carrots and things that bolt, like lettuce, when it gets hot. And then you work your way into your summer season where you have your tomatoes and your peppers and things that cannot handle the cold at all. And then you go back into the fall season as it gets cooler. You want to then be planting those same things you would in the spring. So I know everybody usually thinks about the summer garden, but don't forget about the spring and the fall garden, because they can be just as prolific. Pumpkins were a big thing that I focused on growing this year, and I had a huge learning curve with pumpkins. I didn't realize how difficult they were going to be to train up a trellis. The vines are just, they kind of do what they want to. They're thick and woody, and they're not really manipulated easily. And unless you've got a really good trellising system and you know what you're doing, they're most likely going to spread all over the ground, and they take up a lot of space. This year, the harvest for my pumpkins was quite disappointing. I planted 6 varieties of pumpkins, like almost 6 complete seed packets, and I only got 5 pumpkins. And it wasn't because the flowers weren't getting fertilized or anything. It was simply because my vines waited until most way through the season to even push a single female flower. And if you're a beginner and you have no idea what a female versus a male flower looks like, I promise you, once you see them side by side, once a female flower presents itself on your plant, you'll have no doubts about it. It looks like there's a mini pumpkin between your vine and the flower. So there's absolutely no mistaking a male flower versus a female flower on a squash plant. But next year, some things that I'm gonna try differently to try and combat the issue of my pumpkins wanting to wait until really late in the season to start producing pumpkins is I'm gonna pinch off the male flowers. I did see somebody recommend doing that. I think that is totally worth a try, as well as I am going to be like vigilant about giving them fertilizer. And there's kind of a common theme throughout this whole video. Fertilize your stuff. Like, that can just go a long way into producing fantastic yields. One thing that I am definitely going to prioritize for next year is rodent protection. I know some people deal with squirrels digging up their bulbs or deer eating all their flowers. My issue is rabbits. I have a resident rabbit that for the longest time lived under my steps, and we could not live trap it or anything. We live in the city, so we can't take any other measures to get rid of it. This rabbit was just like destroying all of my crops. It ate all of my corn, sunflowers, snap peas, green beans. It just ate everything. So next year, I'm really going to work on covering my crops with like chicken wire and everything until they are big enough to kind of fend for themselves, and a rabbit can't just like eat the whole plant in one bite. Definitely research some different options depending on what kind of rodent you're dealing with, which brings me to the next topic. A really good way to deal with insect pressure as well as just any kind of pest pressure is plant more than you want to harvest. I believe it was Luke from MI Gardener who stated that you should plant about 10% more of your crops than what you want to harvest, and that way you get your food and you don't have to spray any nasty chemicals or anything to keep the rodents away and the pests away, because everybody is getting what they need and everybody's happy, you know, working with nature instead of against nature. So if you can at all possible plant more than you need, that would be a really good organic solution to your pest problems perhaps. And I want to encourage you to not feel like you need to have everything figured out to even start gardening, or even just like have everything figured out your first year. Take your first year and maybe even your first handful of years to really figure out what kind of gardener you are. There are so many different methods, from aquaponics to permaculture to raised bed gardening, in-ground gardening, all kinds of different methods for people to grow food and plants. I always thought that I was going to be a strictly raised bed type of gardener, and it turns out that other than, you know, say like root crops that I'll probably always grow in raised beds because our soil is very hard and clay here, and it's just easier for those root crops to grow in lofty soil. But other than those, I'm going to heavily rely on in-ground planting. I just really found myself drawn to the appeal of row crop style gardening. So, you know, maybe build yourself a couple raised beds, but don't go crazy the first year, because it may turn out that you don't want to grow in raised beds, and then you've wasted all that money and time putting those raised beds together when you would rather just grow on the ground, and that's also cheaper. On the topic of money, do not feel like a garden has to be a big investment. Gardening can be as cheap or as expensive as you make it. You can grow on any scale. You can, you know, if you don't have money for expensive plants, you can buy seed starts or even trade seeds with friends, family, neighbors, or, you know, like barter for, you know, plant starts. There might be a local seed bank. There are lots of different ways for you to make gardening very cheap, or you can go as elaborate and extravagant as you want. And that every type of gardening is unique to the gardener and is beautiful and functional. So don't feel like you have to spend a lot of money to get started gardening. Next thing that I want to let you guys in on, and this goes for every aspect of life, not just gardening. Let yourself fail. Yes, it hurts a little bit, it stings a little bit when you maybe don't get the size harvest that you were expecting, you know, when you have a disappointing crop for a year. but it's okay to fail. And it's even better to fail, because then you learn more about the plant than you would if it was just smooth sailing all the way through. Like, what did you really learn from that? It's when your crops fail or you have a hard year that you maybe, have to do some research and you learn more about that plant. And the last tip I have for you all is to just begin. You will be so glad you did. It is so rewarding, so worth all the time and effort and knowledge and everything that you've put in to gardening, and you get to try so many different varieties that you don't find at the grocery store. And don't feel like you have to be ready. I feel like anything worthwhile in this life is worth doing before you're ready. Just jump in with both feet and you might be surprised at the outcome. And every year you'll get better and better. So I hope you guys enjoyed these 10 tips that I have realized after my first year of growing food. And every year we just get better and better. And if you have any other tips that I didn't cover in this video, please share them in the comments below. Help each other out, because we are all learning. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video. Love you all. Bye.